highs as well. Lots of sunshine, lifting those temperatures fairly quickly through the morning. So if you're out and about first thing, it will soon warm up, and there'll be plenty of sunshine until around the afternoon, when the clouds will tend to build, particularly for central and northern parts of the country. And for the far north of Scotland, we're going to see some light outbreaks of rain move in here, making it feel cool. Elsewhere, with lighter winds, feeling pleasant enough.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In the Highland, the A862 is closed along Clacton-Harry Road in Inverness because of a fire. Buses replaced trains again today between Kilmarnock and Stranraer after a fire early this week. The half-hour shuttle train service running between Ayr and Prestwick Town. On the M62 in West Yorkshire, there's a lane closed to eastbound after a vehicle caught fire between junctions 22 and 23 from Rishworth Moor to Huddersfield, causing queues. On the M60 in Greater Manchester, 2 lanes are closed clockwise after an accident between junctions 13 and 14. From Worsley to the A580 East Lancs Road, there are queues from junction 10 for the Trafford Centre, and on the M62 from junction 18 at Sinister Island. And in Lincolnshire, the A15 is blocked by an accident between the A17 at Hollingham Roundabout and the A153 at Sleaford. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
SUV drivers in Oxford will face higher parking charges. Proposals tabled by the local Green Party or passed by the City Council. The motion argues that heavier cars like SUVs cause more damage to roads, are more likely to seriously injure or kill pedestrians, and cause more illnesses due to pollution. However, the Alliance of British Drivers has condemned the plan as absolutely outrageous. Well, let's get the thoughts now of the legendary motoring journalist, Quentin Wilson. Quentin, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. We hear a lot about the war on motorists, this time targeting SUVs because of their weight, and the charges could be astronomical. This idea first started in Paris. Now it's coming to Oxford. Can you tell us a bit about how it would work?
OK, so the idea is that the charges will penalise people who drive heavier SUVs, and I guess by implication electric cars, although Oxford Council haven't said exactly what they're going to do with EVs. But this is all based around this notion of SUVs being heavier than passenger cars, therefore wearing out the roads more. Now, there was a study, I've got it here in front of me, from the University of Edinburgh in 2022 that said real-world tests found that overwhelmingly the wear is caused by large vehicles, buses, heavy good vehicles. Road wear from cars and motorcycles is so low that this is immaterial. Now, obviously, driving around a medieval city like Oxford in an SUV isn't the brightest thing in the world to do. But the idea that we should penalise the owners of these cars based on imperfect science that's been read on social media, I think is completely wrong.
Very good morning to you. It is 9:30 on Friday, the 19th of April. You are with Britain's Newsroom. Ben Leo and Pip Thompson.
Very good morning to you. Israel strikes Iran. The US has reported that Israel has launched a retaliatory strike with explosions reported near a military base this morning in Iran. The UK government is stressing the need for de-escalation and moderation.
The Prime Minister pledges to end the sick note culture in Britain. That's what he says it is. He's set to strip GPs of power to sign people off work.
And should we pay our teachers more money? New analysis shows vacancy rates have risen in 9 out of 10 local authorities in England since 2010. So how do you think we should make the profession more appealing?
Labour's housing solution. Sir Keir Starmer, Labour leader, sets out his plan to build 1.5 million new homes to tackle the housing crisis. But would they be affordable?
Very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Morning, Pip. We're going to be sticking, of course, with that development overnight in Iran about Israel's reported strike on the country, the retaliatory strike. Also, we're going to be live, aren't we, Pip, with Rishi Sunak in, just a few minutes about these welfare reforms?
Yeah, any moment now. We will, of course, bring you a roundup of the news headlines, but we might have to dip out of it to hear from the Prime Minister about how he is going to tackle what he calls is Britain's sick note culture. What is your experience? A record number of people are now off work. The number of people has shot up since the pandemic. What is your experience? Do let us know.
Before all that, here's your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Ben and Pip, thank you very much. Well, as we just heard there, Rishi Sunak is speaking in central London. We're going to take you there live now to hear more from him as he sets out his welfare reform plan.
Overcome whatever barriers they might face to living an independent, fulfilling life. Everyone with the potential should be supported, and not just to earn, but to contribute and belong. And we must never tolerate barriers that hold people back from making their contribution and from sharing in that sense of self-worth that comes from feeling part of being something bigger than ourselves. And that is why this is a moral mission, and why the value of work is so central to my vision for welfare reform. And it's fitting to be setting out that vision here at the Centre for Social Justice. Over your 20-year history, you've inspired far-reaching changes to welfare. And I want to pay tribute to you and, of course, your founder, my friend Ian Duncan-Smith, who began that journey of reform in 2010, a journey carried through so ably today by Mel Stride. Because when we arrived in office in 2010, people coming off benefits and into work could lose £9 for every 10 they earned, by far the highest marginal tax rate. And that was morally wrong. So we created universal credit to make sure that work always pays. We introduced the national living wage and increased it every year, ending low pay in this country. We're rolling out 30 hours of free childcare for every family over 9 months of age. We've halved inflation to make the money you earn worth more. And we've cut workers' national insurance by a third, a £900 tax cut for someone earning the average wage, because it is profoundly wrong that income from work is taxed twice when other forms of income are not. For me, it is a fundamental duty of government to make sure that hard work is always rewarded. I know, and you know, that you don't get anything in life without hard work. It's the only way to build a better life for ourselves and our family, and the only way to build a more prosperous country. But in the period since the pandemic, something has gone wrong. The proportion of people who are economically inactive in Britain is still lower than our international peers, and lower today than in any year under the last Labour government. But since the pandemic, 850,000 more people have joined this group due to long-term sickness. This has wiped out a decade's worth of progress in which the rate had fallen every single year. Now, of those who are economically inactive, fully half say they have depression or anxiety. And most worrying of all, the biggest proportional increase in economic inactivity due to long-term sickness came from young people, those in the prime of their life, just starting out on work and family, instead parked on welfare. Now, we should see it as a sign of progress, of course, that people can talk openly about mental health conditions in a way that years ago would have been unthinkable. And I will never dismiss or downplay the illnesses people have. Anyone who has suffered mental ill health or had family and friends who have knows that these conditions are real and they matter. But just as it would be wrong to dismiss this growing trend, so it would be wrong to merely sit back and accept it, because it's too hard, too controversial, or for fear of causing offence. Doing so would let down many of the people our welfare system was designed to help. Because if you believe, as I do, that work gives you the chance not just to earn, but to contribute, to belong, to overcome feelings of loneliness and social isolation. And if you believe, as I do, the growing body of evidence that good work can actually improve mental and physical health, then it becomes clear we need to be more ambitious about helping people back to work, and more honest about the risk of over-medicalising the everyday challenges and worries of life. Fail to address this, and we risk not only letting those people down, but creating a deep sense of unfairness amongst those whose taxes fund our social safety net in a way that risks undermining trust and consent in that very system. We can't stand for that. And of course, the situation as it is economically unsustainable. We can't lose so many people from our workforce whose contributions could help to drive growth. And there's no sustainable way to achieve our goal of bringing down migration levels, which are just too high, without giving more of our own people the skills, incentives, and support to get off welfare and back into work. And we can't afford such a spiralling increase in the welfare bill and the irresponsible burden that will place on this and future generations of taxpayers. We now spend £69 billion on benefits for people of working age with a disability or health condition. That's more than our entire schools budget, more than our transport budget, more than our policing budget. And spending on personal independence payments alone is forecast to increase by more than 50% over the next 4 years. Let me just repeat that. If we do not change, it will increase by more than 50% in just 4 years. That's not right. It's not sustainable, and it's not fair on the taxpayers who fund it. So, in the next Parliament, a Conservative government will significantly reform and control welfare. Now, this is not about making our safety net less generous, or imposing a blanket freeze on all benefits, as some have suggested. I'm not prepared to balance the books on the backs of the most vulnerable. Instead, the critical questions are about eligibility, about who should be entitled to support, and what kind of support best matches their needs. And to answer these questions, I want to set out today 5 Conservative reforms for a new welfare settlement for Britain. First, we must be more ambitious in assessing people's potential for work. Right now, the gateway to ill health benefits is writing too many off, leaving them on the wrong type of support and with no expectation of trying to find a job with all the advantages that that brings. In 2011, 20% of those doing a work capability assessment were deemed unfit to work. But the latest figure now stands at 65%. That's wrong. People are not 3 times sicker than they were a decade ago. And the world of work has changed dramatically. Now, of course, those with serious, debilitating conditions should never be expected to work. But if you have a low-level mobility issue, your employer could make reasonable adjustments, perhaps including adaptations to enable you to work from home. And if you're feeling anxious or depressed, then of course you should get the support and treatment you need to manage your condition. But that doesn't mean we should assume you can't engage in work. That's not going to help you, and it's not fair on everyone else either. So we're going to tighten up the work capability assessment such that hundreds of thousands of benefit recipients with less severe conditions will now be expected to engage in the world of work and be supported to do so.
So that's the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak there unveiling his new welfare reform. Some staggering stats. He says that Britain is spending more on sickness benefits than on schools or the police. Long-term sickness is already at 69 billion once costs such as housing are included.
He says the Tories will reform and control welfare and it is going to look more at what best matches people's needs. He wants an end to the sick note culture and over-medicalising the everyday challenges and worries of life. That is what Rishi Sunak said Let's hear what Steve McCabe says. He is the Labour MP for Selly Oak. Steve, I trust you heard a little bit of that. The Tories will reform and control welfare if they win the next election. Your thoughts, please.
Well, it's extraordinary they haven't done anything about it in the past 14 years, I suppose. Look, I wish I believed what the Prime Minister was saying. Sometimes when I listen to him, I think he's trying to convince himself rather than everybody else. The reality is that they've had years to tackle this. I spent several years sitting on the Works and Pensions Select Committee, listening to evidence of what the government could and should do to help people back into work. They've repeatedly failed to do it. And now, magically, just before an election, when he knows he's going to be challenged and criticised for that, he's announcing a plan to cut benefits for sick and disabled people. It's just so typical of everything he does.
OK, Steve, well, it's easy to critique from the sidelines. So what would a Labour government do to tackle this problem?
Well, Labour's always started from the position, that's why we're the Labour Party, that if people can work, they should work. But what we know is there are measures that have to be taken to get people back into work. And that isn't about dragooning sick and disabled people into work. And it isn't about putting people with serious mental health problems into situations where they could be at risk and put others at risk. What we do need is to do something about our mental health services so that people can get treatment quicker, earlier, better intervention so that they don't reach a critical phase. We need to allow people who are trying to get back into work to have a better protection so that they don't lose all their benefits if it goes wrong and they have to go off on long-term sickness again. We need to increase the scope of access to work so that disabled people get quick and easy access to the technology that could help them in work, and we should give them that before they get a job so that they're job ready, not wait until they've found a job and then make them wait months to get the right equipment.
So, Steve, when will the Labour leader be announcing what he is going to do on welfare reform? Because we haven't had any details from him.
Well, I think Liz Kendall actually made quite a detailed speech about what she felt needed to be done to tackle this problem just a few months ago. And as I've just indicated, there are some very obvious things. It's about better access to mental health services. It's about better access to the equipment and technology that helps disabled people. And it's about working more closely with employers to make sure that people who can work get the support that keeps them there. And of course, we've got to make sure that if someone who's been unemployed for a long time because of a health problem goes back to work, if they have a relapse, we don't want them to lose every single penny that they had previously received in benefits.
And Steve, whilst we've got you here, you are, of course, Shadow Defence Minister. Can we get your thoughts on Israel's strike against Iran last night, please?
Well, I mean, the news is still pretty sketchy, obviously, but I don't think anyone can be surprised that Israel carried out some act of retaliation after they had 300 drones and missiles targeted on their people. It looks like it was a limited and quite a surgical strike, and I guess like everyone else, I hope that's it, and we can get back to the issue of looking for a ceasefire and the release of the hostages and aid into Gaza, which I think is the pressing issue in the Middle East.
Isn't it important now for all sides to show restraint, though? Because there is a risk, is there not, Steve, of a full-scale war developing?
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I hope this was a limited surgical strike. I'm not surprised it's happened after what the Iranian regime did. And we do have to remember, you know, it's a pretty grim, evil, despotic regime, and it's responsible for most of the trouble in the Middle East. So the Iranian regime have no real grounds for not expecting a retaliatory attack, but I hope that will be the end of it.
But Steve, the argument is, just very briefly, the argument is that Iran was responding to Israel's attack on their consulate, killing a lot of their top people.
Yes, I realise that is the version of events that Iran has managed to spread. But I mean, the reality is the Hamas are financed by Iran. Islamic Jihad are financed by Iran. Hezbollah are financed by Iran. And the event that took place in Damascus, I mean, I don't know, I don't think the details are clear, but the event that took place was at a meeting of Islamic Revolutionary Guards and Hamas terrorists. That's the people who were targeted.
Got it. OK, Steve McCabe, thank you very much for joining us this morning. You are the Labour MP for Selly Oak and, of course, the Shadow Defence Minister as well.
Stay with us here on Britain's Newsroom. Apologies, Ben.
That's OK.
We have a recruitment crisis in English schools, apparently, and teacher turnover rates is making it even worse. So, is it time we just pay them more money? We'll debate that next. Stay with us.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
There is a kind of a Mediterranean side to that as well, because my mother came from that side, you know, a big family. And I think there is that sense of community where family is kind of key. And I think that's really kind of what we sort of try and continue, really. I mean, certainly with children and stuff like that, you know, Sunday lunches were always, you know, the big thing.
Yeah,
really.
But if you go down the Old Kent Road today...
Very different. Very different, yeah. And that was quite some time ago as well, because we were very close to where the Thomas Becket was.
Yeah, I know. I know, the boxing upstairs and all the rest of it. Yep.
And I did go down there not so long ago, actually, and it really is very, very different. I mean, I'm not saying that's necessarily bad. I think we have a different view of things.
Most people in London, Nicky, don't even know the names of the next-door neighbours.
No, true.
We've completely lost that sense of community that you grew up with, that you knew. I think it's a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say sometimes I'm a bit guilty of it where I am now as well. You live in big houses, and I do see my neighbours, but, you know, it's not quite the same as it was back.
And I guess from that background, you're a teenager, you want to become a hairdresser.
Yeah,
that must have been quite a difficult call.
Yeah, that one was a really good call. My dad went, oh, God, what? I mean, it was just very funny. And certainly from the point of view of, you know, this was the early 70s. And so it wasn't really the kind of the choice of most people would do.
No, but you did. Why?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I went to a grammar school and I didn't do as well in the final exams, and I was kind of forced into sort of leaving. And you suddenly go, ooh, no idea what to do here, really.
Yeah.
But the idea of doing something in fashion, and, you know, I really kind of... I know that I was given some really good advice, actually, by somebody that said, just start at the bottom. Don't necessarily go to, you know, college or whatever. Not that there may not be anything wrong with those, but just start at the bottom, go to the best place you can and start sweeping the floor.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Pip Thompson and Ben Leo. Now, the TUC union claim that a recruitment crisis in English schools is being made worse by huge turnover rates among teachers.
Yeah, so is it time to pay our teachers more as a greater incentive to stick to the job? Well, joining us now is Reeb Ibrahim, Communications Officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs, and the teacher and broadcaster, Bobby Seagull. Bobby, let's come to you first. You're a teacher. Should we pay you more?
Yeah, so I think when you ask people why they join the teaching profession, they join because they're so passionate about young people's education. They want to improve the lot of the next generation in our country. But again, I used to work in the city in my 20s and I've become a teacher in my 30s, but something has gone wrong. And ultimately, I say you look at the supply and demand to see how teachers are voting with their feet. So in the teaching profession, teachers pay £9,000 to train to be a teacher. Yeah, 1 in 8 of them will leave within the first year. But even more shockingly, within 5 years, 1 in 3 teachers who joined the profession pay £9,000 to train. And these are people that really want to help young people. They leave. So ultimately, if the pay and working conditions, not just about pay, the pay and working conditions were better, we wouldn't find this recruitment and retention crisis.
Well, I think it's important, because we keep talking about should we pay teachers more, we need to actually explain how much teachers earn currently. So, as I understand it, the minimum starting salary for a teacher, Bobby, is £30,000 a year.
Yeah.
Typically, a teacher can get £40-odd thousand a year. Head teachers could be on £100,000 plus. Is that about right?
Yes, I mean, obviously, head teachers are running a school that supports an entire community. Again, for my time working in the city, look at the economics of it. So the Institute of Fiscal Studies, an independent body, they found between 2010 and 2022, so the last 12, 13 years, in real terms, teaching profession has dropped 13% in pay compared to the rest of the economy up 2%. Again, it's not about, I always think with education, it's not about trying to compare sectors, but ultimately, teaching profession over the last 12, 13 years, I think as a country, if we value education so much, Mr. Sunak, our Prime Minister, when he joined, became the leader of the Conservative Party and our Prime Minister, he said, improving education is the closest thing that we have to a silver bullet to improving the outcomes of our country. And if that's really true, I don't think we should be quibbling about small amounts here and there. Ultimately, if teachers are, again, losing pay in real terms, 13% over the last 12 years, people are leaving the profession, clearly we're not paying people enough.
OK, Reem, there's some good points made by Bobby there. And teachers, they are so important to inspiring young people. They can change somebody's life. What do you make of what he had to say?
Absolutely. Teachers are incredibly important, and they are really teaching the next generation of young people that then go off to contribute into the private sector. So you're absolutely right. Teachers are really important. And, you know, we can have a conversation about whether or not they deserve more money. Most of that, though, is in the context of public sector pay. So when we're talking about public sector pay and public sector workers and how much they are paid, that has to be spoken about in the context of public sector spending. The money has to come from somewhere, and we're already spending huge amounts of money in the public sector. Public debt has been increasing over the last few years, and our debt to GDP ratio, again, has been increasing. So we've got to have this conversation in the context of spending. Where is that money actually going to come from? And is it going to come from tax rises? Now, the reason why I think this is really important, because not everybody benefits from teachers having an increased pay. The average Tesco shelf stacker doesn't need to pay more tax. And I think it's immoral for them to be paying more tax in order to pay somebody else's salary that they don't directly benefit from. It's really interesting also, we spoke about the IFS figures. I think the IFS have really underscored here, because they also don't take into context the incredibly generous public sector pension system. Yeah. So, you know, on average, teachers have earned about £42,000 in 2021, but they were also benefiting from employer pension.
Reem, I'm very sorry. I'm going to have to interject and wrap you up, unfortunately. Thank you so much, Reem, and Bobby Seager as well. Really appreciate your expertise on this.
And we should just say they did get a 6.5% pay rise from September last year. So they have had something in the last few months, but is it enough? Let us know.
Plenty more to come. First, here's your weather with Aidan.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Rain clearing the southeast today, followed by further showers for many of us, accompanied by cool, blustery winds, although skies do brighten later in time for a sunny start to the weekend. Here's the picture by mid-morning. A lot of cloud on the map. Showers affecting many places, particularly central and eastern areas. Skies, though, do brighten across much of central and western Scotland, and then later on, western parts of the rest of the UK. We keep the showers going through the Midlands, the southeast as well, accompanied by a cool and gusty wind. That's going to make it feel a little disappointing, I think, with highs of 12 to 15 Celsius. Nevertheless, the showers across central areas do fade away into the evening. The skies tend to clear as well, and the wind eases. As a result, with lengthy clear skies, a lighter wind, temperatures will fall through the night, touch of frost even as we begin Saturday. So gardeners beware, there will be some frostiness first thing, but there'll be plenty of bright skies as well. Lots of sunshine, lifting those temperatures fairly quickly through the morning. So if you're out and about first thing, it will soon warm up, and there'll be plenty of sunshine until around the afternoon, when the clouds will tend to build, particularly for central and northern parts of the country. And for the far north of Scotland, we're going to see some light outbreaks of rain move in here, making it feel cool. Elsewhere, with lighter winds, feeling pleasant enough.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In the Highland, the A862 is closed along Clacton-Harry Road in Inverness because of a fire. The M90 in Perth and Kinross is partly blocked northbound by an accident between junctions 8 and 9 from Glenfarg to the Bridge of Erne, causing delays. Buses replaced trains again today between Kilmarnock and Stranraer after a fire near the railway. On the M62 in West Yorkshire, there's a lane closed eastbound where a vehicle caught fire between junctions 22 and 23 towards Huddersfield, causing queues. In Lincolnshire, the A15 is partly blocked each way by an accident just outside Sleaford between the A17 Holdingham roundabout and the A153 Grantham Road. On the A48M in Cardiff, the outside lanes closed southbound again today for repairs at St Mellons, causing queues. And in Essex, Eastern Avenue in Southend is partly blocked eastbound by an accident between Hamstall Road and the A13, causing delays. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning to you. It's 10 a.m. on Friday, April the 19th. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Ben Leo, and Pip Thompson.
The Prime Minister pledges to end what he claims is the sick note culture in Britain, and he wants to make hard work pay.
Israel strikes Iran. The US reports that Israel has launched a retaliatory strike with explosions near a military base this morning. How will the international community respond? Mark White has more.
Well, the Iranian government has said that it has no plans to retaliate at this stage if what Israel has launched overnight is the full total of this limited strike. It may be a way forward for de-escalation.
Is the EU trying to lure Britain back? Under their new plan, people under 30 would be allowed to live in Europe for up to 4 years to improve post-Brexit youth mobility.
And in a GB News exclusive, we can reveal there's been a tenfold rise in care sector investigations by the Labour exploitation watchdog. Our man Charlie Peters has more.
The Gangmasters and Labour Abuse Authority has confirmed that surge in investigations into the care sector, with researchers and MPs telling me that the rise is linked to industrial-scale abuse of the visa route.
Labour's housing solution, Sir Keir Starmer, sets out his plan to build 1.5 million new homes to tackle the housing crisis. But would they be affordable?
As always, let us know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. The comments are absolutely flying in at the moment. Pip and I have been watching them intently. I'm keen to know, Pip, about Sir Keir Starmer's housing reforms. What's he going to do to ensure young people get on the housing ladder? I'm not sure what you guys think at home, but I am guilty of being a bit of a NIMBY back down south. My only problem is with these new build houses. I'm not a fan of these sort of toy town new build estates, but let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say.
He's talking about the grey belt, isn't he? Not the green belt, the grey belt, which is building on part of the green belt. We'll explain a little bit more very shortly after your headlines with Sam Francis.
Pip and Ben, thank you very much, and good morning to you from the newsroom. It's just after 10 o'clock, and leading the news this hour, the government is calling for de-escalation and moderation in the Middle East, following reports that Israel launched airstrikes against Iran. Iranian state media says 3 drones were shot down, with explosions heard at an airbase near the city of Isfahan. It's thought the strikes were in response to last weekend's attack when Iran fired a barrage of its own drones and missiles at Israel. Local air defences were also activated and commercial flights were grounded. Senior Iranian officials have said that there's no plan for any immediate retaliation against Israel. There's also been no reported damage or reports of any injuries. Former chairman of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, says that Israel appears to have targeted nuclear sites.
There are reports that Iran is beginning to enrich uranium again at scale, up to 60%, with enough quantity for 3 sizable bombs. And it could be that they believe that only by having a nuclear deterrent are they going to be able to fend off any conventional attacks. So a lot of big questions there. And that's perhaps worth pondering on, because whatever happens next, the rules of the game, this shadow war between Iran and Israel has completely changed with this direct attack.
Rishi Sunak says there is a moral mission to end what he's called sick note culture and to give people the best possible chance of returning to work. During a major speech on welfare reform in just the last few minutes, the Prime Minister claimed that since the pandemic, something, he says, has gone wrong, with 850,000 more people now economically inactive. He's also claimed people with less severe mental health conditions should be expected to engage in the world of work. However, Labour has accused the government of failing to deliver a healthy nation and a healthy economy. In Scotland, opposition parties are urging the SNP to cooperate fully with a police investigation into its finances after Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Morrell, was charged with embezzling funds. The SNP's former chief executive was charged in connection with the spending of more than £600,000 in donations for independence campaigning. It's part of a 3-year-long investigation known as Operation Branchform. Officers have confirmed that the 59-year-old is no longer in custody. We also understand he has resigned his SNP membership. In other news, parents are being warned that children aged between 5 and 7 are spending too much time, often unsupervised, on social media. Ofcom claims that 38% of infant school children now use platforms including TikTok, WhatsApp and Instagram, despite those sites requiring users to at least be 13 years old to have an account. The regulators also suggested that a quarter of children in that same age bracket, 5 to 7 years old, now have a smartphone. The research comes as the government's online safety bill, which aims to make the internet safer for children, is set to come into force in September. We've heard today that the government could adopt live AI facial recognition to screen migrants arriving in the UK for potential threats. The UK's anti-terror law advisor is concerned that migrant processing centres are overwhelmed, with some people being released before thorough checks are carried out. The move would allow border officials to screen those crossing in small boats against a database of terror suspects. More than 6,200 people have so far crossed the channel this year. The proposals come as the government's Rwanda plan, aimed at deterring small boat crossings, is currently stalled in deadlock between the House of Commons and the House of Lords. The government's being warned it's too focused on short-term responses to extreme weather, including floods, storms and heat waves. The Public Accounts Committee is calling on ministers to urgently act to put long-term planning in place. Their report claims that failure to do so could come at a high cost to individuals, the economy and to society. The government, though, says the UK does have a robust, flexible planning system in place. In the US, Donald Trump has labelled the hush money case against him as a mess. That's as the full jury of 12 have now been sworn in for the trial. The former US president addressed reporters as he left court in New York, saying he was supposed to be campaigning ahead of the 2024 presidential election. Those on the jury include an English teacher, multiple lawyers and a software engineer. Trump denies the allegations against him of falsifying business records to pay an adult film star. And the O2 Academy in Brixton is holding its first gig tonight since 2 women were killed in a crush in December. They died when fans without tickets tried to get into a show by a Nigerian artist. Lambeth Council ruled the venue could keep its licence as long as it met robust safety rules. Those are the headlines. For more, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the code there on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, though, it's back to Ben and Pip.
Good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben Leo and Pip Thompson. Great to have your company this Friday morning.
Very good morning to you. Now, Rishi Sunak has said it wouldn't be right for him to speculate on reports that Israel this morning has carried out an attack on Iranian soil.
Comes after 2 US officials had already confirmed an Israeli missile hit Iran in the early hours of this morning.
Let's take a look at what the Prime Minister had to say a little bit earlier.
As you would appreciate, it's a developing situation. It wouldn't be right for me to speculate until the facts become clear, and we're working to confirm the details together with allies. We have condemned Iran's reckless and dangerous barrage of missiles against Israel on Saturday, and Israel absolutely has the right to self-defense. But as I said to Prime Minister Netanyahu when I spoke to him last week, and more generally, significant escalation is not in anyone's interest. What we want to see is calm heads prevail across the region.
So that was Rishi Sunak a little earlier saying he didn't want to speculate. No speculation from our GB News Home and Security editor, Mark White, but he can tell us exactly what we know so far. Over to you, Mark.
Well, we're expecting Israel later this morning or early afternoon to confirm that they indeed did carry out this limited strike on Iranian soil, and world leaders will be hoping that because of the limited nature of that strike, that might well be enough to start leading to a de-escalation in this crisis. The mood music that's coming from Tehran this morning seems to be one of playing down the significance of those strikes and saying that they have no plans at the moment, at least, to retaliate any time soon. So they're clearly still assessing exactly what happened. We understand that a number of Israeli combat jets fired long-range missiles. Now, those jets will have fired those missiles from outside of Iranian airspace, likely from Syria, because we were getting reports from Syria state media that a number of air defence sites and early warning radars were taken out by the Israelis overnight. That would have allowed them access to Syrian airspace to fire off those missiles. There are also reports that drones were fired in tandem with those missiles from in-country. Now, what we understand is that those drones, whoever they were fired from inside Iran, were fired to try to effectively keep those air defence systems in Iran busy while the missiles did their work. So Isfahan is the area that was targeted. We believe that a city in the northwest of Iran may also have been targeted. It looks as though that northwestern city was a site where ballistic missiles were launched from. Isfahan not only has some important military bases around that area, there are nuclear sites in Isfahan or around the Isfahan area. The International Atomic Energy Agency has said, though, that there is no damage, no indication that any nuclear facilities have been targeted. And as far as Isfahan is concerned, apart from the military bases, the nuclear sites, it's believed that there is also drone production facilities. And that's important because we know that 170 drones were fired at Israel on Saturday night. So targeting those drone facilities, if that's what they've done, may well make sense here. But all eyes, I guess, are on Iran now, and of course on Israel too, to get that final confirmation from them as to what they targeted and what their plans are next, if they will. They're unlikely to share that, but the hope is that this was a single limited response to Iran, and it's not just the first phase in what will be deeper strikes on that country.
Thanks very much, Mark White, GB News' Home and Security Editor. I know you'll update us again very shortly. But let's go back to central London, where the Prime Minister, a little earlier in the last hour, has been setting out his welfare reform plan. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, was there, and he asked a question.
Next, we go to GB News.
Christopher Hope from GB News. Prime Minister, is this sick note culture a generational thing? Are you basically saying that Britain's got to pull itself together, get back to work? Do older people just get on with it and younger people don't want to? And can I ask you a question about the Rwanda flights? You now won't say these flights will take off by the end of spring. Will you say they'll take off by the end of the summer?
Right. So on this question of mental health, I just want to be really clear. I'm not in any way saying that mental health isn't a serious condition. Of course it is, and that's why, as I outlined earlier, we've invested a record amount in it, record amount of people getting treated for it, and it is a very welcome thing that we all can talk and acknowledge mental health issues in a way that we wouldn't or couldn't have done a decade ago. And look, if you're feeling anxious or depressed, then of course you should get the support and the treatment that you need to manage your conditions. But that doesn't mean that we should assume you can't engage in the world of work, because that isn't going to help you when all the evidence says that work can be good for your mental health. And what we need to not do is risk over-medicalising these things when it comes to the welfare system and over-medicalising what are essentially the everyday challenges and anxieties of life. Right? That is distinct from a welfare system that recognises people with severe conditions needs very specific help and support. You know, for lots of other people with less severe conditions, they can and should be expected to engage in the world of work, and that's why we're going to reform the work capability assessments again and look at how PIP treats these conditions. But this point on young people is important, and I said it should worry all of us. The biggest proportional increase in the group of people who have become economically inactive since the pandemic is young people. Right? That is a tragedy. Right? It's enormous waste and loss of human potential, and so as a matter of urgency we should be wanting to tackle that. And as I said, if you believe very strongly as I do that work is good for people, particularly early in their careers and life, then we must look at reforming this system, because how it's working at the moment, forget about what it's doing on the money and everything else, and it's unsustainable and bad for the economy. It is fundamentally letting these people down if we are writing them off rather than helping them get into work, because that's probably one of the most positive things we can do for them. On Rwanda, look, the very simple thing here is that repeatedly everyone has tried to block us from getting this bill through. And yet again, you saw it this week. You saw Labour peers blocking us again, and that's enormously frustrating. Everyone's patience with this has run thin. Mine certainly has. So our intention now is to get this done on Monday. No more prevarication, no more delay. We are going to get this done on Monday, and we will sit there and vote until it's done. I think everyone will be able to see that there's a clear choice here. You've got a Conservative government that is doing absolutely everything it can to pass this bill so that after that, we soon as practically possible can get flights to leave to Rwanda and build that deterrent so that we can stop the boats. And you've got a Labour Party that is doing absolutely everything it can to delay and frustrate us in that aim. I think the British people can see that very clearly, but we're not deterred. We're going to do everything we can to stop the boats and get. As I said, look, the priority now is to get this bill passed. Right at the end of the day, we've got to get this bill passed. And I said now very clearly, we're going to get this done on Monday. We don't want any more prevarication or delay. Enough from the Labour Party. We're going to get this bill passed, and then we will work to get flights off so we can build that deterrent, because that is the only way to resolve this issue. If you care about stopping the boats, you've got to have a deterrent. You've got to have somewhere that you can send people so that they know if they come here illegally, they won't get to stay. It's as simple as that. The bill is the way we're going to deliver that. Next.
So our man Christopher Hope, GB News political editor, quizzing Rishi Sunak there, the Prime Minister. Interestingly, Sunak making another pledge over Rwanda, saying we're going to get it done on Monday. Don't worry about that, we're going to get it done. But in terms of the welfare reforms he's announced today, let's speak to our political, or not ours, the political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Good morning, Kevin.
Morning.
The Prime Minister says that Britain is over-medicalising common anxieties, and particularly young people, he blames, are behind it. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? Clearly, the government is worried about the high levels of people being signed off sick and want to help as many who can work get back into work as quickly as possible. I think the issue, there's two issues really for Rishi Sunak here. Is one, these promises have been made continually under successive governments for a very, very long time about helping those out of work back into work and getting them off sickness benefits. And two, I think most people have already come to the conclusion that Rishi Sunak's not going to be Prime Minister for very much longer, and that we've got an election coming in a few months' time. This is effectively a consultation. It's not as if it's going to come into being next week. Therefore, is it really going to make much difference this side of a general election? And I don't really think it is.
How much cut-through as well, Kevin, do you think it will have? Because some people would listen to that and say that he is belittling young people, he's showing a lack of compassion, and they want younger people to vote for them at the next election. Compared to 5 years ago, the voting age, we're told, is a lot higher.
Yeah, there was a poll yesterday, I think, which showed that the average age at which people are now more likely to vote Conservative than Labour has risen to 70 from something like the mid-30s in 2019, which is a remarkable increase. So clearly the Conservatives have a big problem trying to get young people to vote for them. I think the wider issue here, though, is that I was looking at some polling earlier on this morning, and the public are pretty evenly split when it comes to how society deals with mental health issues. Roughly a quarter think that the country should be doing more to help people suffering mental illness, but roughly the same number, or slightly less, think that more people who are currently off sick due to mental health issues could actually be working. So it doesn't strike me as a sort of slam dunk, politically advantageous policy announcement either. But clearly, this is something that the Prime Minister and the government have been talking about for a few months now, and it's clearly something that he wants to get done before a general election, because, as I say, it doesn't look like he'll be Prime Minister after that.
Kevin, what do you make of the arguments that young people have enjoyed COVID lockdowns? They've got a taste of, the home life, working from home, Is Kevin still with us, or has he gone? Oh, you're still there? Sorry, you disappeared.
Yep.
That young people have basically got used to the easy life at home, and they just don't want to graft the 9 to 5. They don't want to do what generations have done before and go to work, maybe even multiple jobs, because COVID gave them a taste of something, a once-in-a-generation taste of what it's like away from the workplace and working hard.
No, I think that's a sweeping generalisation, really. I mean, the young people, much younger than me, I have to say, the young people that I know don't fit that stereotype, that they do want to work. Maybe they want a better work-life balance, and they don't necessarily want to be in the office 5 days a week and maybe want to split their time from working from home and being in the office. But the idea that that means that they don't want to work at all and that they're just lounging around all day on YouTube, I think is not true. But, you know, there's no doubt that the pandemic changed the way that all of us approach work. I'm working from home today. I'm usually in the office, but I'm working from home today. Previously, that probably wouldn't have been an option. So, but I'm still working, and I think those that work from home are still working. So I think it's pretty unfair to say that young people who don't want to work effectively, and again, if the Conservatives want young people to maybe vote for them, then that's not really the message that they should be putting out.
Political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, as always, appreciate your input this morning. Some people would also say that the government is distracting from its lack of investment in mental health services when people try to get appointments and they wait months and months.
Well, the other argument is, some of you have said on gbnews.com/your say, it boils down to immigration. There's just too many people here. You can't get GP appointments, you can't see a dentist, you can't get mental health appointments, you can't get housing.
Or it's to do with a lack of investment in public services.
Yeah.
And not to do with immigration at all.
Yeah.
What do you think? Let us know. Tell me the email address, Ben. I still can't remember this blooming email address. Oh, it's on the screen. gbnews.com/your say.
I think it can be a bit of both, can't it? It can be, yes, the government and the Tories have not invested properly in infrastructure, and also maybe there's a bit of a problem with uncontrolled migration. But anyway, still to come. We are going to be discussing children as young as 3 years old, is that right?
I can't get my head around this.
Kids as young as 3 having smartphones, of course, with internet access and all the stuff that accompanies that. I've got a 4-year-old. There's absolutely no way in hell he is having a smartphone.
Do you ever sit him in front of a tablet while you're having food with friends?
Oh, no. Not out for dinner, no. On a long car journey, maybe. Sometimes we drive to Scotland, perhaps, but definitely not.
Because it's the easy thing to do now, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And I get why. I understand.
I get why parents do it, and actually, before my kids were born, we were saying they're only going to eat organic food, they're not going to watch telly until they're 17, and all that kind of stuff. So, it goes out the window because life is hard. I get it, but anyway.
What's your experience? Do you have a teeny tiny tot who's obsessed with a mobile phone? Do tell us. How do we get, well, not just young people, but really, really weeny ones off social media? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's a remarkable story, isn't it?
Amazing.
Extraordinary. And also, she was unflappable, apparently, the Princess Royal.
She's
just
brilliant.
refused to get out of the car and said, I'm not going anywhere. Extraordinary. Well, Jim Beaton was awarded the George Cross for protecting the princess, and delighted to say joined us now, along with the former head of royalty protection, Di Davis. Jim, you won't remember, but I met you some time ago at the Imperial War Museum when Princess Anne was opening an exhibition to do with the George Cross, and you were there reunited with her. And you told me then what great admiration you had for the princess, cool under fire, but you didn't do so badly yourself.
It was probably my job. And also, I had a wee bit of police training, not very much, but a little bit, whereas Princess Anne had nothing. And yet, the way she displayed it, you would have thought she'd been highly trained to deal with any type of that situation.
Even though you'd had some training, you took 3 bullets for the princess. You effectively stood between her and a deranged gunman.
Well, I was supposed to be a protection officer, really, so I just tried to fuddle about. You must remember that back in 1974, there was no communication, and we were extremely lucky that Michael Hills, who was outside Clarence House and nearby, had got one of the fast police radios, or radios on his shoulder, so he was able to send a message out. Otherwise, we would have just been relying on the good old public to phone in and say there was something happening.
Yeah.
So times have changed drastically.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Good morning. You're with Ben and Pip on Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News. We're joined now by former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Newsroom, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. And may I say, I said it when you walked in off air, you guys are looking fab this morning. I feel a bit underdressed, all of you, including you, Pip.
Well, you have let the side down. It has to be said. We didn't want to mention it, did we, ladies? But, you know, come on, someone's got to say.
Well, men are quite limited, aren't they? I mean, all we can do is whack a...
You can do whatever you
I've
want.
copied you, gone blazer.
Who,
I'm
me?
rather androgynous today.
Yeah, you look great.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that.
Thank you very much.
Should we get stuck into some of the...
Yeah, enough of the flattery.
Yeah.
Everyone always does this in telly. Oh, I love your dress. Oh, your dress is
Yeah,
gorgeous.
and as soon as you walk out the room...
Where'd you get your dress from?
Yeah, and as soon as you walk out the room, my God, she looks dreadful.
Oh, God.
Oh, no.
Let's just
Should I keep
get
my
on
mouth
with the
shut?
input, yes, Ben.
Sorry.
As if that's ever going to happen.
I was
Ben
only
Leo
being
keeps
polite.
his mouth shut. Never.
No, we're off to a flying start.
Right. After all that mutual flattery, we'll carry on, shall we? And talk about what we mentioned a few minutes ago. Quarter of children under 7 having their own smartphone. Dawn.
I just couldn't... I was reading this story first thing this morning. I couldn't believe it. I've literally just got a new smartphone the other week and I have got no idea how to use it still. It's like... So the fact that 3-year-olds now have smartphones and are using... Not just phones, not like, you know, the very simple things you can play bubbles games on, but proper smartphones.
And is it... I want to believe that they've sort of taken it off their parents and just having a bit of a play for a few minutes. But it's more than that.
They are literally... They have their own phones. God. But over 50% of parents have no problem with this. And I can't understand it. And this report, it's an Ofcom report, also says that they are accessing all the sorts of things on the internet they shouldn't be accessing because the checks and balances about age just don't seem to work. You know, kids will always find that they're cleverer than we are. They always find ways around things. So they're accessing stuff that is...
Can a 3-year-old... I mean, Ben, you've got kids. Could a 3-year-old find their way around a smartphone?
My boy Jude, who's 4, he knows... Actually, no, he doesn't. Once I open the Notes app on an iOS device, he likes drawing and he knows how to operate the Notes app in an iPhone or an iPad. But no, he wouldn't.
Do you know what, though? There is a thing, like, these kids are growing up a lot more used to social media than we are, because obviously we didn't even have it. And I've noticed now, if you say to a child, oh, can you show me what a phone is? They sort of go like this, or like this. I mean, sorry, they go like this, rather than like this. So things are changing, and I know children will grab your phone and they know how to swipe from such a young age.
They know how to swipe.
Yeah, whereas we didn't know that, did we? I think that's the thing. It's like, my generation, we didn't grow up with the internet, and we're bringing up this new generation of like digital natives from birth, and that's why I don't think we always register how harmful this stuff really is.
You're going to end up breeding a generation of children whose communication powers are very limited because all they do is do that. Don't look up. Don't look at anybody in the face. No.
I think we've already got it. We've got generations now. I remember working at my old newspaper. We'd have people coming from universities on work experience. They'd been stuck in a digital world for years and years and years, and they'd come into work, couldn't pick up a phone, couldn't look someone in the eye and speak to them, couldn't knock on a door to chase a news story. It was insane. So I guess the argument is, though, Dawn, if you do ban young kids from accessing technology, are they going to be left behind when they get a bit older and their peers are so advanced in their coding, creating websites?
Well, you have to somehow make it a blanket ban. I mean, sort of like, Rishi Sunak keeps going on about making it tougher for kids to access stuff they shouldn't be accessing on their phones, but it just doesn't seem to be happening. They keep finding ways. So you have to surely set an age limit so no child under a certain age has a phone.
I think it's about social media mainly, though, because I know when I was reading the infamous Cass report, there was the links with social media use, poor sleep, online harassment, poor self-esteem, poor body image. What equals that? Huge mental health problems. And we've seen that, haven't we? Mental health problems in younger people particularly are absolutely skyrocketing, and I don't think the link between that and phone use can be...
And the thing is, Amy, nothing on there is real. Nothing is real. You're not seeing realistic body images. You're not seeing realistic lifestyles. You're being fed a lie, but you're believing you are not as good as everybody else because they look so much better than you and have a nicer car, nicer house, nicer clothes.
Sorry, Pip, go on.
No, I was just going to say, doesn't this therefore show that this the government looking at cracking down on the use of smartphones under 16s, isn't it, and on social media, that is sorely needed?
It's very much needed, but I don't know how they're going to do it. Because there are checks in place, supposedly checks in place, to stop 13-year-olds accessing so much stuff on there. But these kids are doing it. These kids are doing it at 7, 8 and 9 years old.
There was an opinion piece, I think it was a Canadian website, where a parent said she'd rather her child have second-hand smoke blown in their face than use social media because it's such a massive concern of all the harm that it can potentially do.
As a bigger health,
as less of a health concern than social media.
Well, Facebook owner
for very young children with developing brains.
Facebook owner Mark Zuckerberg doesn't let his kids use Instagram or Facebook, so, I mean, what does that say?
Exactly, yeah. What does that tell us?
Should we move on to this second story? The European Union is trying to worm its way back into bed with Britain. I guess it's anticipating an impending Labour government. They're saying that they've proposed a freedom of movement-style deal for young Europeans to appeal to a future Labour government. Basically, 18 to 30-year-olds can go to Europe to work for 4 years. Europeans can come here to work for 4 years. Freedom of movement. Sir Keir Starmer's made no secret, of course, of the fact he would like closer ties with the EU. Is this the first sign, the first step of us getting back into bed with the EU, Amy?
Well, I think that's perhaps what some of the headlines want us to think, but Labour have already ruled it out, as have Number 10. So this is more of the European Commission saying, hey, we propose this freedom of movement style deal, which sounds to me a lot like the Erasmus scheme. Do you remember the Erasmus scheme? A foreign exchange student exchange programme, basically. And I think the proposal sounds pretty good, actually. It means that students and young people under 30 from European countries can come here, and a reciprocal scheme, our young people can go over to Europe to
There's a
work,
limit, though, isn't
study.
there? There's a 4-year limit.
Well, at the moment, the scheme has just been completely denied by anyone on our side, and it's just a bit of a proposal from Brussels that has been kind of dead in the water. But the Erasmus scheme, that could come back, and that has a lot of support from the likes of Sadiq Khan signed a letter, a few lords have signed a letter, because a lot of people feel that we really lost something with that when we left the EU. So I think it would be a good idea to have some sort of foreign exchange programme, but it doesn't look like it's going to be this one.
Dawn, I mean, some people could never understand why freedom of movement ended anyway.
Well, quite, but I mean, we are where we are with the whole Brexit thing. But this is, as usual, everything in favour of the EU and not so much in favour of this country, because we, under this proposed scheme, as Amy quite rightly pointed out, it is just a proposal. We accept people from the whole European bloc, but our students are only allowed to go to one country.
OK, Dawn, Amy, thanks very much. You'll be back with us shortly. Let's get your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Good morning from the newsroom. 10:33, a recap of the headlines this morning. The government is calling for de-escalation and moderation in the Middle East, following reports that Israel launched airstrikes against Iran. State media says 3 drones were shot down, with explosions heard at an airbase near the city of Isfahan. The strike is thought to be in response to last weekend's attack, when Iran fired a barrage of its own drones and missiles at Israel. We understand no damage or injuries have been reported. Senior Iranian officials, though, say there is no plan to immediately retaliate. The Prime Minister says there is a moral mission to end what he's called sick note culture and to give people the best possible chance of returning to work. During a major speech on welfare reform, Rishi Sunak claimed that since the pandemic, something has gone wrong, with 850,000 more people now economically inactive. However, Labour has accused the government of failing to deliver a healthy nation and a healthy economy. Opposition parties are urging the SNP to cooperate fully with a police investigation into its finances after Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Morell, was charged with embezzling funds. It's in connection with the spending of more than £600,000 in donations for independence campaigning. Officers have confirmed the party's former chief executive is no longer in custody, and he has also resigned his SNP membership. That's the latest from the newsroom. For more, do sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2445 and €1.1684. The price of gold is £1,914 and 47 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,823 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In the Highland, the A862 is closed in both directions along Clacton-Harry Road in Inverness after a fire. Buses replaced trains between Kilmarnock and Stranraer again today after a fire. In South Yorkshire, Prince of Wales Road at Gleadless in Sheffield is partly blocked northbound by a breakdown causing queues. In Lincolnshire, the A15 is partly blocked by an accident near Sleaford between the A17 Holdingham roundabout and the A153. On the A48M in Cardiff, the outside lanes closed southbound again today for repairs at St Mellons causing queues. In Oxfordshire, the A40 is partly blocked westbound by an accident just before the Hennington roundabout at Oxford causing queues. And on the M4 in London, there's a lane closed where a lorry has a puncture eastbound on the exit at Junction 3 at Heston causing queues. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
So J. Cole, who is a rapper, says he felt terrible after releasing a song aimed at fellow rapper Kendrick Lamar and vowed to pull the track off streaming services. He said, "I ain't gonna lie to y'all. The past 2 days felt terrible," he told an audience at the Dreamville Festival in North Carolina. "I damn near had a relapse," he said.
There's a lot of young people, especially, that would look at that and they will take it not just as entertainment.
It doesn't happen in any other form of art that I can think of. This is not happening in country music, is it?
Well, it's the same. It's the same problem in both cases, isn't it? Who's doing the regulating? And surely it's each case on its merits, isn't it? You don't just ban a genre.
Why is there such a lot of hatred for a man who usually would have trash talked back? To stand up and say, this doesn't sit well with me and I love this guy. If we look at, I think his name was Cody Fisher, the semi-professional footballer who died in a club because someone stabbed him. Yeah. Now, he was stabbed because he stepped on someone's trainers. This is the level of ego we're seeing from a lot of young men who don't have any output of being able to channel that energy, and a lot of it is stemming from cultures like football, hip-hop, these sorts of things. So I'm just saying it's refreshing to see a man who could have easily wiped the floor with his lyrics say, I don't have to,
That is interesting, isn't it? Because I took this into the wrong direction. It's not about pointing out the areas of concern. Actually, this story is saying, look, music and art can be giving you an example of how to live a slightly better life.
That's free speech. Saying, sorry. I'm sorry, I choose not to fight back because I love you. It may look like a wimpy thing to do, but it's still free speech.
You know what? I love you, Paul. Sorry about earlier.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, it's 10:39. You're with Ben and Pip on Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News. Lots of emails flying in and comments. One from Virginia. Good morning, Virginia. You say no phones for under 16s, no social media until they're 16. The internet is killing childhood. echoed a lot in the gbnews.com/your say comment section as well.
Brian, good morning. Your little nephew, who's 3 years old, pretends that the TV remote is a phone. Well,
my 14-month-old does that. he picks it up and says,
Jan, morning. My grandsons, aged 12 and 10, both have iPhones linked to their daddy's phone, who has full control of what they can do. They can't have email, they can't download apps, and Dad gets notification if they try to download one. He can see what they're doing and for how long, and when it's bedtime, he can turn them off. The technology exists. They need the skills, but to learn them in a safe environment. You don't have to ban phones to keep them safe. I mean, people do say, don't they, if the government goes down this road, it's a bit of a mistake.
No, that's a really good point. And David says, one of your panels said toddlers who have their own mobile phones will have very poor communication skills. Not my daughter. She can download apps, she can search for things of interest. However, she has great communication skills. She can read, and she's only 4 years old in June. Wow. So a 3-year-old that can read. That's pretty good, isn't it? Good stuff.
OK, thank you for all your thoughts. Do keep them coming in at gbnews.com/your say.
Right, we move on. Is the government short-sighted? A bit of a loaded question. Some MPs, well, they reckon that when it comes to extreme weather, warning ministers... Sorry, let's start that again, shall we?
We're talking about extreme weather, and MPs are warning that the government is too focused on its short-term response rather than long-term plans for flooding, for heat waves, for storms.
Yeah, so joining us now is one of my favourite contributors, senior meteorologist, Jim Dale, who is here with some climate warnings, no doubt, Jim. Are we as a nation, are we as a government being too slack on the impending climate catastrophe, as you predict?
Yeah, good morning, the pair of you. Nice to be with you. And the answer is a big yes. They've been slack for a long time. If they're not slack, then they're going backwards. Steering backwards. I'm going to give you one word, actually, because I think there's a line in the sand that's happened in the last few days, and that's Dubai. A huge event to a very, very modern city. Cataclysmic type flooding. 20-odd people dead, and this isn't the first place to go down with this type of event, but it is a major city, and you know, when you get this type of event happening in a very modern city, infrastructure not quite in the right place, it's a massive, massive warning going forward. And I think this is what the MPs have tagged on to, not just this event.
Well, Jim, sorry to interject. You and I both know Dubai has been messing around with weather modification. They've been cloud seeding, which for anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's basically trying to encourage and creating artificial rain. So how do we know that this flooding, it was 18 months worth of rain in just one day, how do we know that wasn't attributed to cloud seeding? Because the UAE government has said they were doing cloud seeding in the days before this incident.
And others said they weren't, but it actually makes no difference. But cloud seeding is a very localised thing. Generally speaking, just a few fields here or there, a small region. This is absolutely nothing. I've looked at the meteorology. This was everything to do with the Arabian Sea, record temperatures, give or take, pushing up very warm, humid air, meeting cold air coming across Saudi Arabia, the convergence of the two air masses, very slow moving, massive thunderstorms fueled by excess temperatures created by climate change. And Ben, we're going to see more of this. Make this absolutely clear. I've been on this station many times, and certainly with Pitt, talking about this subject. And you know full well that this isn't going anywhere tomorrow. And that is why the MPs are concerned that this government is kind of in a way moving more towards the Reform UK denial, build a big wall type thing. That's what Richard Tice was saying last night. I'll meet him on another occasion and talk to him about that one.
Well, no one denies the climate's changing, but how many more tax pounds or civil liberties do you want us to give up to,
how many, Ben, how many do you want to lose? Because the loss is going to be bigger than anything that we spend. And that's the point. And that's not just my words. That's Deloitte, the big financial firm. They know that this is going on. They're putting the cost into billions. And we're already seeing it around the world, eyes wide open, not eyes wide closed. We've got to be seeing what's going on, not just in our own country, which is kind of, sometimes it gets us, sometimes it doesn't. But that message in a bottle in Dubai was, in effect, a massive warning. By the way, just go on, Pip, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that when you go out and you talk to real people who are victims of flooding time and time again, one of the issues is that the barriers aren't high enough. Another issue is that there's too much building on floodplains and that rivers aren't being dredged.
Yeah, you're not wrong with that, and I don't say, don't put those walls higher, but look, you can keep making things bigger and bolder, a bit like walls in Texas to keep migrants out, if you like. You can carry on doing that, but there's always ways and means that the climate, as it's ramping up, as it is doing at this moment in time, will just over stress that. So look, you've got to go to the problem itself. And the problem itself is fossil fuels being put into the atmosphere that are loading the CO2 in the atmosphere, that has given us a greenhouse effect, that is putting temperatures up, that makes the atmosphere hold more water or increasing heat around the globe, which is going on left, right and centre as we speak.
OK, Jim Dale, thanks very much. I mean, some would say that, China's building 2 coal power stations a week. And the UK is responsible for less than 1% of global emissions. So what's it got to do with us?
We do our bit, then. We do our bit.
Yeah. OK. Jim, thanks for joining us this morning. Take care of yourself.
You're welcome.
Do stay with us here on Britain's Newsroom. We're going to be talking about investigations into the care sector, which have surged by more than 10 times in the last few years. But why is that? We'll bring you the results of an exclusive investigation. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Do stay with us.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Rain clearing the southeast today, followed by further showers for many of us, accompanied by cool, blustery winds, although skies do brighten later in time for a sunny start to the weekend. Here's the picture by mid-morning. A lot of cloud on the map. Showers affecting many places, particularly central and eastern areas. Skies, though, do brighten across much of central and western Scotland, and then later on, western parts of the rest of the UK. We keep the showers going through the Midlands, the southeast as well, accompanied by a cool and gusty wind. That's going to make it feel a little disappointing, I think, with highs of 12 to 15 Celsius. Nevertheless, the showers across central areas do fade away into the evening. The skies tend to clear as well, and the wind eases. As a result, with lengthy clear skies, a lighter wind, temperatures will fall through the night. Touch of frost even as we begin Saturday, so gardeners beware. There will be some frostiness first thing, but there'll be plenty of bright skies as well. Lots of sunshine, lifting those temperatures fairly quickly through the morning, so if you're out and about first thing, it will soon warm up, and there'll be plenty of sunshine until around the afternoon when the clouds will tend to build, particularly for central and northern parts of the country. And for the far north of Scotland, we're going to see some light outbreaks of rain move in here, making it feel cool. Elsewhere, with lighter winds, feeling pleasant enough.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, it's 10:49. We've got an exclusive GB News investigation for you now. The care sector. There's a probe from our man, Charlie Peters, about the exploitation watchdog, who has basically reported a surge, a tenfold surge, over the last few years of forced labour. So in 2021, there were just 4 investigations by the Gangmasters and Labour Abuse Authority, while in 2023, last year, there was 44. So what's causing this sudden increase? Charlie Peters joins us now. Charlie, great story and shocking statistics as well. Just give us some context about what you found and, the reason behind it.
Well, most of the researchers and analysts I've spoken to about this sudden surge in these investigations by the Labour Abuse Authority have said that there is a link between the health and care visa route that has seen a very significant surge in recent years. When it was first introduced, the Department of Health anticipated around 6,000 people would take it on, about 0.3% of the total NHS and social care workforce. Last year, 350,000 people arrived on that route. Since January 2021, when the Brexit transition period ended, 570,000 people have arrived on this route. 99% of them are non-EU nationals. And at the same time, there has been a significant criticism of that route and some of the changes in the care sector in recent years. There was a report leaked from the Home Office, earlier this year by David Neal, the former Chief Inspector of the Borders, who found in one case there had been 275 visas issued to a care home that didn't even exist. So with those significant numbers and all these concerning situations, it's no surprise, perhaps, that the Gangmasters and Labour Abuse Authority is now confirming to us through a Freedom of Information request that they've seen that tenfold surge in probes into the care sector.
And what is the care sector saying about this?
Well, there's been quite limited commentary from individual companies. When we asked for further information on the specifics of their investigations, they said it would be too difficult to manually source them. It would breach the cost limits. A government spokesperson told me that they are concerned about abuse of particularly foreign migrant workers in the care sector, and that they've introduced rules in England specifically to not allow visas to be issued unless they are conducting regulated work in the Care Quality Commission. So unless they're being regulated by that authority, that can't be pursued. Also, we've seen over half of those coming on this visa, this health and care visa, are dependents. So that's also been a cause for concern. The government's acted on that earlier this year by reducing that path for dependents. But Unseen UK, which is a modern slavery helpline and charity, yesterday they reported a 30% increase of potential victims calling them from this sector. Really stunningly, that comes on the back of a 606% rise on the year before. So this concern is still growing at the same time as the Labour Abuse Authority is looking into this sector.
So these workers, they're potentially working very long hours, awful conditions.
Bad pay.
Bad pay. How are families of people in care homes, elderly relatives, parents, how worried should they be about the standard of care they're receiving when the workers themselves are being abused like this?
Well, the Tory MP, Neil O'Brien, told me that this visa route has been a boon for criminals and exploiters. And not only is it extremely dangerous for many of the people coming in on this route who are then experiencing terrible conditions in care homes from their employers, as you say, Ben, it's also really concerning for those who have family members in the care sector who are concerned potentially that the quality of the care they're receiving is reducing. There were 0 investigations by the Gangmasters and Labour Abuse Authority in 2020. To then surge up to 44 last year does suggest that almost certainly has been a sector-wide decline in standards as they adapt to hundreds of thousands of new workers and dependents arriving on that route. So it's a sort of a double-edged sword in terms of a decline in standards, both for workers and for those on care.
OK, Charlie Peters, great story. Thank you very much. You're going to have more of this later on in the day. And, what a concern for families of people in care homes if you've got an elderly relative in a care home.
And it's stressful enough, isn't it, when you've got a relative in a care home whose health is declining without hearing information like this. What do you think? Do send your views on that. Post your comments on everything that we have been talking about so far today by visiting gbnews.com/your say. There is plenty more still to come.
Yeah, shall we just get stuck into some very quick emails? Because I know a lot of you on gbnews.com/your say, you've been very active, are asking for us to read some out. So Anita says, on the teachers' pay, teachers get enough, especially if they do the job they train for. Instead of telling them if they are a boy, girl, boy, no, they are there to teach them. And Jeff says, it's amazing the profits of many companies and the wages given to their executives. If they were forced to share even a small amount of those profits with the workers, then more people would go back to work.
And also, Joe, on the issue of teachers, should they be paid more? He says pay the good teachers more because they would need some form of assessment and monitoring. But there are staff where, you know, they are deserving to be rewarded. They are the best of our educators. Stay with us.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's going to turn brighter eventually today, but at first it's cloudy and breezy with showers for many of us. We've got a number of systems moving south across the UK, low pressure close to Denmark, but higher pressure is moving in time for the weekend. Before it gets here, a lot of cloud, a cool breeze coming from the north-northwest. That's particularly noticeable on the North Sea coast. And we've got this area of showery rain moving through central parts of England, into parts of Wales, followed by further showers for much of south-east Scotland, north-east England. Temperatures will be suppressed in that northerly breeze, 11 Celsius in the east, but potential for 16 further west as skies brighten increasingly by the end of the day. And then overnight the rain disappears. And we've got lengthy clear spells up and down the country. With the wind easing as well, well, we're going to see temperatures fall away. Perhaps a few fog patches here and there, particularly for Northern Ireland. Add a touch of frost first thing. But for many, it is a bright start. Blue skies across much of the country. A couple of exceptions. Northern Scotland, the cloud will be thickening through the day with some outbreaks of light rain later. And that breeze down the North Sea will make it feel on the cool side. The cloud will fill in by the afternoon in many places, but it's going to stay largely dry and bright and feeling pleasant with lighter winds compared with recent days and highs of 13 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11 a.m. on Friday the 19th of April, almost the weekend, woohoo! This is Britain's Newsroom with Ben Leo and Pip Thompson.
Very good morning to you. Happy Friday. Israel strikes Iran. The UK government is stressing the need for de-escalation and moderation after Israel launches a retaliatory strike on Iran overnight.
The Prime Minister pledges to end what he says is the sick note culture in Britain, and he says he wants to make hard work pay.
Labour's housing solution. Sir Keir Starmer sets out his plan to build 1.5 million new homes to tackle the housing crisis.
Slow response on Yobs. Shocking new figures show police take almost 18 hours to respond to reports of antisocial behaviour in some parts of England. We'd love to hear what you think about all that and everything we've been talking about so far today. We had plenty of comments on this issue of children as young as 3 using smartphones.
Yeah.
What on earth is that about?
The argument is if you ban kids from using smartphones and technology, they'll fall behind their peers who are, whizzing away, coding, making websites and apps. But do you want 3-year-old kids messing around on smartphones, accessing the internet? I mean, I don't.
And also, what did you make of what Rishi Sunak has to say today about making work pay and people over-medicalising issues like stress and anxiety? What is your experience? What do you reckon? The address, gbnews.com/my-say.
Your say.
Your say. See, I still haven't got it right.
gbnews.com/your say.
I will get it correct before the end of the hour. OK, let's get your latest headlines while I go and practice with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 11 o'clock. The headlines from the newsroom this hour. The government is calling for de-escalation and moderation in the Middle East following reports that Israel launched airstrikes against Iran. State media there says 3 drones were shot down with explosions heard at an airbase near the city of Isfahan. The strike is thought to be in response to last weekend's attack when Iran fired its own barrage of drones and missiles at Israel. No damage or injuries have been reported in the latest exchange. Former Defence Select Committee Chairman Tobias Ellwood told GB News this morning that Israel may have targeted a nuclear site.
There are reports that Iran is beginning to enrich uranium again at scale, up to 60%, with enough quantity for 3 sizable bombs. And it could be that they believe that only by having a nuclear deterrent are they going to be able to fend off any conventional attack. So a lot of big questions there, and that's perhaps worth pondering on, because whatever happens next, the rules of the game, this shadow war between Iran and Israel has completely changed with this direct attack.
In other news, the Prime Minister is promising that his Rwanda safety bill will be passed on Monday. Rishi Sunak couldn't confirm whether asylum flights would get off the ground by this spring deadline, but he did say his intention was to get the bill through Parliament without any further delay. He says MPs will be forced to sit in the Commons until the job was done. And Rishi Sunak is also warning against over-medicalisation of everyday stresses and worries. That's as he laid out plans for welfare reform. During a major speech this morning, the Prime Minister has claimed that 850,000 more people are out of work since the pandemic, many of them with mental health issues. He's claimed people with less severe mental health conditions should, he says, be expected to engage in the world of work. And he also said he thinks he'll be accused of lacking in compassion, but insisted that the UK can't afford such a spiralling increase in the welfare bill.
We now spend £69 billion on benefits for people of working age with a disability or health condition. That's more than our entire schools budget, more than our transport budget, more than our policing budget. And spending on personal independence payments alone is forecast to increase by more than 50% over the next 4 years.
Opposition parties are urging the SNP to cooperate fully with a police investigation into the party's finances after Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Murrell, was charged with embezzling funds. It's in connection with the spending of more than £600,000 in donations that were dedicated towards independence campaigning. Officers have confirmed that the party's former chief executive is no longer in custody, and he has also resigned his SNP membership. Parents are being warned that children aged between 5 and 7 years old are spending too much time, often unsupervised, on social media. Ofcom claims that 38% of infant schoolchildren now use platforms including Facebook, TikTok, WhatsApp and Instagram. That's despite the sites requiring users to be at least 13 to have an account. The regulator also suggests a quarter of children in that same age bracket now own a smartphone. The research comes as the government's online safety bill, which aims to make the internet safer for children, is set to come into force in September. The government's being warned it's too focused on short-term responses to extreme weather, including floods, storms and heat waves. The Public Accounts Committee is calling on ministers to urgently act to put long-term planning in place. Their report claims that a failure to do so could come at a high cost to individuals, the economy and to society. The government, though, says the UK does have a robust and flexible system in place. To the US, where Donald Trump has labelled the hush money case against him as a mess. That's as the full jury of 12 have now been sworn in for the trial. The former US president addressed reporters as he left court in New York, saying he was supposed to be campaigning in other states ahead of the 2024 presidential election. Those on the jury include an English teacher, multiple lawyers and a software engineer. Trump denies the allegations against him of falsifying business records to pay an adult film star. And finally, before we hand back to Ben and Pip, the O2 Academy Brixton is holding its first gig tonight since 2 women were killed there in a crush in December 2022. Gabby Hutchinson and Rebecca Ikumelo died when fans without tickets tried to get into a show by a Nigerian artist. Lambeth Council did rule the venue could keep its licence as long as it met robust safety rules. Those are the headlines. For more, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, though, let's get more from Pip and Ben.
Good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben Leo and Pip Thompson.
Emails are on our desk. You have been getting very, very vocal about Sick Note Britain. Are we a soft touch or is there a mental health crisis? John, good morning. You say, I suspect that this sickness crisis is correlated to lockdowns, long COVID and excess deaths. Mike says, on climate change, we had Jim Dale on a few moments ago. He says, of course the climate is changing. We don't live in a dome. If no human had ever set foot on planet Earth, there would still be floods and storms and changing weather. Interesting.
Philip says, if we're going to endure more flooding, we need to be more adventurous in developing better ways of controlling it. Better defences, better reservoirs, better drainage systems. You cannot keep building more houses. OK, let's go back then to what the Prime Minister was talking about earlier, vowing to end sick note culture. That's what he describes it as. And he's unveiled a plan to strip GPs of their power to sign people off work.
And it comes as new figures this week revealed a staggering 2.8 million people are considered, quote, economically inactive after being placed on long-term sickness benefits. So, are all these people really too sick to work, or are they having a bit of a blag? Joining us now to shed some light on this is behavioural psychologist Joe Hemmings. Good morning, Joe. Some people have said or suggested that I've been a bit cruel by maybe mooting the idea that actually some people, especially the younger generation, are being a bit lazy. They've just got used to working from home. They enjoyed the lockdown period where they weren't having to go and graft in an office from 9 to 5. Is this some of that, or is there, you know, really a mental health crisis as described?
Look, I mean, there's a little part to it. Of course, if you've got a system that allows you to take advantage, there will be people who do exactly that. However, I think the main concern, this thing about over-medicalisation of sickness or of illness, I think that's mainly referring, as you say, to mental health issues. And I think part of the problem is not teaching our kids at an early enough stage what the difference is between a mild bit of everyday anxiety that we all go through and what is depression. You know, they're two very different things. Teaching them coping mechanisms if they are feeling a bit stressed. I mean, all this should be part of a school curriculum, so we don't end up in this strange situation where we're very candid and open about our mental health. However, there's a great deal of misunderstanding still going on about, you know, what is it kind of just normal, if you like, in everyday life, and we can still go to work, and what really does need proper attention and treatment.
I mean, the British Medical Association has come out and has urged the Prime Minister to avoid using a hostile rhetoric on sick note culture. He has been accused in other quarters of lacking compassion in the way he talks about this. Is that fair?
I think it is fair. That it's a bit rich, to be fair, to have kind of damaged health system, to have not put enough money into building a decent health system, building a decent mental health support system, and then after you've done that, then to say, oh, well, yeah, you know, people are kind of using this sick note culture. If there's any culture about, it's because there isn't enough support there at an early enough stage for people to be able to understand whether they are truly sick or whether they, you know, they can go on. What can they do? Where's the support? So I find it a bit like locking the stable door after the horse has bolted and sort of blaming people for a situation that's been created effectively by the government.
What about GPs losing the power to administer these sick notes and bringing in instead specialist work and health professionals? How concerned are you about that? Because one wonders whether how qualified these people are going to be to do this work.
Yeah, and whether they have the history of that patient and whether indeed, well, they certainly won't have the relationship, if there is a relationship between a patient and their GP, however sort of scant that may be, there is something there. If they don't have that background, how on earth are they going to judge, particularly on a mental health basis, whether somebody is fit to go to work or not? And again, I feel, you know, making GPs under so much pressure these days is, again, another sort of exit route for the government to sort of cover up their own tracks.
Joe, you are a behavioural psychologist. Have you got any practical tips or advice that people could do today if they're feeling a bit down or a bit anxious? What can people do to make themselves feel better before it escalates into something more serious?
Well, they're very simple things, very simple coping mechanisms, such as breathing techniques, 3-3-3, breathe in for 3, hold it for 3, breathe out. I mean, it does sound simple. Do it 2-3 times. And what you do is you bring down your levels of adrenaline and cortisol, and actually it just makes you feel calmer very quickly. Exercise is another good thing. There's been a study today saying how much exercise de-stresses us. So again, get out there, get a bit of fresh air, do the things you can do, eat healthily, all that lifestyle. But for quick, simple, you know, just feeling a little bit less stressed, breathing exercises and getting some exercise might just tip you into a better place.
Yeah, and I think there is logic in saying that actually getting back into work, even if it's not full-time, but having that routine can be hugely helpful.
It is, and it's one thing to say it, but for some people it feels like a mountain to climb to get back into work. So they need to be in work to understand the benefits, the well-being benefits of being in work. So I think, again, more to encourage people about what they might do, careers advice, what might suit them if they want to work partly from home, and also because they got used to it and partly work in an office or a different working situation. Again, the flexibility to find the right sort of role for the right sort of people. Again, yeah, work is undoubtedly incredible for our well-being, but you've got to kind of be in it to know that.
OK, Jo Hemmings, behavioural psychologist, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Very much appreciated. Should we bring in former Tory MP Scott Benson now, who joins us live down the line? Scott, good morning. Dare I say it, are we simply a soft touch? Do we need to man up? I know that phrase isn't appreciated these days, but do we need to man up?
Good morning, Ben and Pip. Absolutely, we do need to man up, and I'm afraid we are a soft touch when it comes to not only unemployment benefits, but sickness benefits as well. And the figures speak for themselves here. 2.8 million people out of work signed off on the sick is absolutely shocking. And to put these figures into context, that's up from 2.1 million just a few years ago, and it's almost threefold what it was a generation ago as well. When I was elected in 2019, the country was spending £42 billion on sickness benefits. That's now risen exponentially to £69 billion every single year. This is simply unsustainable for the government. And of course, it's hindering our economy. Tory MPs will talk about trying to restart the sluggish growth we've seen in our economy over the last 10 years. We talk about tax cuts, planning reform, supply side reform, but I'm afraid that getting people who can work back to work has to be the absolute top mission for this government. This has been going on for far too long, and I suspect Conservative supporters and MPs up and down the country will have been cheering the Prime Minister on this morning with his speech, but also asking, why on earth weren't we bringing forward these measures 2 or 3 years ago, following the pandemic, when the early signs of this huge explosion in people, in many occasions, swinging the leg and not going back to the office was, I'm afraid, all too common.
Well, there has been more reaction from all sides about his speech. One of them is from the Lib Dem leader, Sir Ed Davey, Scott, who says that the Prime Minister's welfare reforms, it was a desperate speech from a Prime Minister mired in sleaze and scandal. And you, of course, Scott, are part of that sleaze and scandal. You were suspended last year.
Well, you would expect Ed Davey to say that. The Liberals Party and the Labour Party have no interest whatsoever in getting people to work. And I suspect this will become a wedge issue at the general election, and rightly so, between a Conservative government who, to be honest, could and maybe should have done more to tackle this issue, as I've just said, over the last few years, but a Prime Minister who is now bringing out plausible measures to try and tackle people who can work and who should be working, but who are choosing not to, versus a Labour Party and a Liberal Party. And certainly in the case of Labour, we saw 13 years of Labour Party government when the figures of people who could work but who weren't working just rose
But does he not have a point about a government mired in sleaze and scandal? I mean, we've now got this situation with Tory MP Mark Menzies. Well, he's had the whip removed, alleged misuse of campaign funds. We've had Neil Parish, Chris Pincher, Peter Bone, Crispin Blunt. Many MPs in this government, including yourself, have been caught up in problems, serious problems.
Well, if we're talking about the issues here, which we are, if we're talking about the future of this country, we're talking about economic growth, getting people back to work, that's what Wish's speech was about today. Of course, standards in Parliament is a slightly different issue, and the Conservatives, myself included, have had issues regarding this during the course of this Parliament, but so have the Labour Party and so have all parties in Parliament. So let's not pretend this is a Conservative-only issue. We've seen Labour MPs, for example, have to leave their positions throughout the course of this Parliament as well. But with respect, you invited me on the show today to talk about sickness benefits, and that's what many people will want to hear from the Prime Minister about and what he's trying to do to get those people back into work.
Yeah, we get that, Scott, and we appreciate you being here to talk about it. But, I mean, Pip was asking about Sir Ed Davies' accusation that this is merely a distraction to what's going on with his government. So that's why the question was asked.
No, I appreciate that, Ben. Of course, the Prime Minister has got a job to do. He's got to govern, and it's only right that he will seek to address issues such as this, which the British people care about. I note this morning he was, of course, asked about the Mark Menzies situation. You would expect that, but from the Prime Minister's point of view, he's got a huge number of issues to tackle, whether it be welfare and benefit reform, whether it be the NHS, economic growth, immigration, and you would naturally expect the government to want to tackle those issues ahead of a general election.
OK, Scott, thank you again for being with us. Really appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Thanks.
And Mark Menzies, he has issued a statement saying, I strongly dispute the allegations put to me. I have fully complied with all the rules for declarations. As there is an investigation ongoing, I will not be commenting further.
OK, I mean, I know Scott, he did very well there. You can tell he's a politician deflecting that question. It was a valid question because Sir Ed Davey is saying this morning that this speech about welfare reform is just a distraction about the chaos going on in the government. And you've got a good point. Peter Bone last year, Mark Menzies, William Ragg, that, you know, absolutely crazy situation with the honeypot sexting scandal. Who knows?
But to be fair to Scott, he did rightly say there are MPs of other colours caught up in sleaze and scandal as well.
Yeah, I said last night on Patrick's show about Keith Teflon Vaz. You remember him some years ago? Anyway, we won't go into it. We're going to get to the break. Let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. Up next, the government is calling for de-escalation and moderation in the Middle East following reports overnight that Israel launched airstrikes against Iran. How will the international community respond? You're with Ben and Pip on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stay with us.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In every corner of the world, people celebrate English tradition and values as members of the Royal Society of St George. Yet here in England, branches are closing as membership dwindles.
I feel that in this country, St George is all but dead and buried.
Until recently, Stephen Warden from Wigston was president of the Leicestershire branch. Despite spending £1,500 of his own money advertising, he couldn't find enough members to keep it running.
I did everything humanly possible to get new members into the branch from the local environment, but they were just not interested in joining.
He thinks changing demographics and declining interest in the society's values contributed to disappearing membership. But he also blames political leadership at national and local levels. Stephen claims his proposal for a St George's Day parade was repeatedly rejected by Leicester City Council over 10 years. A celebration is planned for St George's Day, but like most cities and towns, no parade will pass through the streets. A Leicester City Council spokesperson said, Leicester's annual celebrations of St George's Day have been organised and funded by the City Council for many decades, and they remain an important part of the city's festival calendar. Some in Leicester say they would like to see more done to celebrate England's patron saint.
I think it's a sign of patriotism. I think it helps the country. We celebrate a lot of religious festivals here.
People forget, I think, what is important to England.
Maybe it's been sort of jumped onto with the wrong crowd, but I think nowadays it's just completely different.
Back in Wigston, St George's Cross flies above Stephen's home.
It makes me feel good because I know at least I've not forgotten St George if everybody else has.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It is 11:24 this Friday morning. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben Leo and Pip Thompson. Great to have you with us. Also here is former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Newsroom, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. And we'll be talking about your old paper, their front page lead, shortly, Dawn. But first of all, Kemi Badenoch telling watchdogs to scrap company equality quotas. Kemi Badenoch, the business secretary.
Hallelujah to that, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm sorry. I just think someone needed to say it. Diversity, she is saying in this risk. Look, we already have legislation that prevents people discriminating on sex, ability, age, all of these things in the workplace. So why do we now need companies above, I think, 350 employees, is it, to list people by, every other their faith, that, all these things. Why do we need to know that? And what really annoys me about this story, Pip, is that sex and gender are lumped together. So if you're talking about getting more women into the workplace, that includes trans women. And I was reading a story last week about a CEO of a big company, a first female one ever, but they're not.
Are they trans?
It's a
trans woman.
Yeah, so it's also not fairly representing females in the workplace. That's my main issue with that. So well done, Kemi.
What a joke to women, Amy, that is.
What,
I don't want to talk about... I'm not going to knock horns again about trans.
I just think that's a category of women, so of course they would be included in those statistics. But
come on.
I think the reason that we need to know these figures is because so many groups are underrepresented in employment and there's massive inequality. So the idea of scrapping equality quotas at this time, when we have a more diverse than ever society, but we still have inequality based on gender, social class, disability in the workplace.
But we have legislation.
It just seems really counterproductive.
But Amy, maybe some people are just better at other jobs than others, or some demographics have more interest in other fields than others. I mean, the NBA is about 95% black.
Well,
are you going to go over there and start kicking off about black players in the NBA?
If we levelled the playing field of opportunity, which is what I think equality quotas do. But I think you're right that most companies won't need to scrap these because they'll know it's best practice to have them regardless. So any good business will keep these because they've been linked pretty consistently to profitability, and the ultimate aim of any business is to have profitability.
So just to clarify, if you ran a business, any old business, you had two candidates, one was exemplary, great CV, the other was, say, a gay black person, but you were down on your own targets, who was less qualified, you'd hire the diverse hire, would you?
No, because that is positive discrimination.
Well, what's the difference?
Well, what you're talking about is illegal. It's about making the playing field even for the white candidate and the black gay candidate. It's about levelling the playing field for everyone. And to have a diverse workforce is linked to efficiency and profitability. And any good CEO will tell you that, which is why it's pretty much in the law. It's a legal requirement to advance equality. It's not just a moral imperative.
Requirement already.
It's not about this moral imperative, well, aren't we great, we've got all these people. It's about increasing efficiency and profitability by understanding the diversity of your customer base.
By giving the worst candidate the job.
That's misreading. That's not what it's about. It's about giving equal opportunities. In Britain, what do we value? We value fairness and we value opportunity. And all this equality, diversity initiatives do is create equal opportunities. And surely that's a good thing.
Not about discriminating against women. Yeah, sorry.
I mean, was Hamza Youssef right when he went on an anti-white rant saying there's too many white people in governmental posts and
I
departments.
think what he was trying to do, quite clumsily, is just draw an eye to the fact that black people are underrepresented in a lot of higher-up positions across the board. I mean,
would it have been racist if he got up there and said there's too many black people in government posts?
No, because they're not historically
because
underrepresented, are they? White people have had quite a good, easy ride throughout history.
OK, let's change topic completely and have a, well, I was going to say have a bit of a laugh with this, but there is a serious side to it. The British fry-up is in danger of dying out as youngsters turn their back on the full English dawn. 1 in 10 health-conscious 18 to 34-year-olds never eat a British fry-up.
What are they having instead? I couldn't quite work out from the story what they were actually having. Avocado on toast. Yeah, beat me to it. It's a health thing, isn't it? And 89% of them, I think, is the statistic. So when they have eaten a full English pip, they just instantly feel guilty. And to be honest, if you sit down and work out the nutritional content of a full English breakfast, it is like around 2,000 calories. That's enough.
Oh, it's a heck of a lot. So what have we got? We've got bacon, eggs, sausage, beans, toast. What about some people have black pudding as well?
Black pudding. Now, this is the better debate is not whether Gen Z and millennials are actually eating big full English breakfast. It's what you put in them.
It also depends if it's fried or grilled, by the way.
Or air fried.
Yeah.
They're probably doing it in an air fryer.
Maybe that's why these youngsters are so anxious all the time. They just need to relax.
Just eat.
Do you know why people are anxious? This is an explainer for Sick Note Britain. You've been talking about it all morning. There's too many fry-ups. We need to get healthier.
I don't think fry-ups are that bad for you,
my God,
especially if you
horrendous.
grill them. If you've got, say, poached eggs, grilled bacon. I mean, bacon's, full of protein, very minimal fat if you cut the fat off. I don't think it's that bad fry-up.
No, I'm with Gen Z on this.
Isn't it better than a bowl of cornflakes?
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably
More protein, more satiating, it's going to fill you up. Cornflakes is just pure old carbs.
Everything in moderation. Don't need it
How
every day.
I live my life, Dawn.
As a
not.
Yeah. We've heard about you, love.
All right, one man who looks like he's never devoured a fry-up in his life because he's so lean and handsome is Sam Francis. He's got your news headlines.
Ben, thank you very much for those kind words. And it's just after 11:30. The headlines from the newsroom. The government is calling for de-escalation and moderation in the Middle East following reports that Israel has launched airstrikes against Iran. State media says 3 drones were shot down with explosions heard at an airbase near the city of Isfahan. The strike is thought to be in response to last weekend's attack when Iran fired its own barrage of drones and missiles at Israel. We understand no damage or injuries have been reported in that latest exchange. The Prime Minister is promising that his Rwanda safety bill will be passed on Monday. Rishi Sunak couldn't confirm whether asylum flights would get off the ground by his spring deadline, but he did say his intention was to get the bill through Parliament without further delays. He says MPs will be forced to sit in the Commons until the job is done. Leading mental health charities have described Rishi Sunak's welfare reforms as deeply damaging and an irresponsible war of words. During a major speech on welfare reform this morning, the Prime Minister warned against the over-medicalisation of stresses and worries and claimed that people with less severe mental health conditions should, he said, be expected to engage in the world of work. However, Labour has also accused the government of failing to deliver a healthy nation. In Scotland, opposition parties are urging the SNP to cooperate fully with a police investigation into its finances after Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Murrell, was charged with embezzling funds. It's in connection with the spending of more than £600,000 in donations for independence campaigning. Officers have confirmed the party's former chief executive is no longer in custody, and he has also resigned his SNP membership. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. For more, do sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code there on your screen or go to our website gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2451 and €1.1684. The price of gold this morning is £1,915 and 60 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,832 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Sam, thank you. Coming up in exactly 27 minutes' time is Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emma. Hello.
We love being quite so particular with when we're going to turn up on the television. It's very... I hope everyone at home is setting their timers, perhaps their long-range egg timers. Yes, but we've got quite an exciting show coming up because we're going to be speaking... I don't know if you've seen the case of the Jewish man in London who was forbidden from crossing the street by a police officer saying he risked antagonising a pro-Palestinian protest because he was wearing a kippah. We're going to be speaking to that man who was told he couldn't cross the road and he couldn't walk towards a certain area of London simply because there was a pro-Palestinian march there.
Goodness me. And did he heed that advice or did he do it anyway?
Well, he asked to cross the road and they said they would escort him, but only once the march had passed because they didn't want to risk...
too visibly Jewish.
That was the phrase they used.
I mean, that's a disgrace. We had it in the pro-Palestine protest with that chap who was walking around with a placard saying Hamas are terrorists, and they arrested him and moved him away from the area. He was allowed there to protest and to have his say, and instead of dealing with the actual troublemakers, they deal with the very peaceful...
And this is one step further, because this man wasn't protesting, he didn't have a sign, he was just simply someone who was visibly Jewish.
And importantly, not the first time either that this has happened to people from the Campaign for Anti-Semitism. So if you remember, just after October the 7th, they were trying to raise awareness of the hostages and the police targeted them driving around with their billboard van rather than the protesters who might assault them or cause trouble because they were driving around in Westminster, and just asked them to leave London.
Interesting. Was Suella Braverman right in her infamous Telegraph column? I mean, some would say she's been vindicated since then.
Well, we'll be certainly asking that question to the man who faced this extraordinary experience over the weekend. But we're also going to be speaking to Anna Firth, the Conservative Member of Parliament who has a private member's bill to ban pet abductions. Now, this bill is facing its third reading now in the House of Commons. It's going to make a specific offence to steal cats and dogs.
Is it not already?
They're regarded as property, aren't they?
So currently, it is illegal to take someone's cat or dog, but it would be treated in the same way as if you took their television. This would make it a more serious sort of crime. So we're going to be speaking to her about her bill too, and also asking people to send in pictures of their cats and dogs.
And of course, more coming up on Israel.
I'll send you mine.
Marvellous, yes.
Do, Pip, do.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Emma and Tom. Great stuff. All that and more to come, of course, at midday. For now, though, you're with Britain's Newsroom with Ben and Pip on GB News. Stay with us.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Cheryl Baker. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
When you think back to 1981, I mean, obviously the ABBA victory then wasn't all that long ago, 9 years earlier. Do you think they had a huge influence then on the sort of direction that Eurovision was taking?
Yeah, they did. They changed it completely. Because up to then, it had all been very staid and a bit posh, long frock, sticky bow ties, you know. And then they came along and they blew it out of the water. They looked so different. And they modernised it. And I think, yeah, it made a big change. Made a big change after that.
And we were watching your performance on Eurovision a little bit earlier on of making your mind up. I mean, you had so much fun, didn't you, up on that stage? Were you, in some part, inspired by ABBA?
Yes, I would say so. It was... ABBA was 74. I turned professional in 75 and did my first song for Europe, which was, you know, when they choose the British song to go forward. I did my first one in February 1976. So, yeah, it was only months after ABBA's performance that I started my own Eurovision journey. Yeah, they just changed the face of it. They changed the face of Eurovision. And if you look at what Eurovision is now, I think that all started with ABBA's performance. It made people think this is much more than just a song contest. It's all about the look. I mean, the clothes, they looked fantastic. And even the composer, or not the composer, what's he called? The conductor. He was dressed as Napoleon. It made it fun. Fantastic song, obviously, brilliant singing, but the whole look of it just changed the way that Eurovision is, and to this day.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning to you. It's 11:39. You're with Ben and Pip on Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Nicola Sturgeon's husband has been charged in connection with embezzlement of funds from the Scottish National Party.
Peter Murrell became chief executive of the SNP in 2001 and he stepped down from the role last year. Joining us now with the latest is our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Tony, what's the latest?
Good morning. Well, indeed, this was quite a shock yesterday as the world found out just after 5 o'clock that Peter Murrell had been re-arrested. Nicola Sturgeon's husband, of course, was arrested about a year and 2 weeks ago, the first of 3 arrests last year in relation to Operation Branchform, that police investigation into £600,000 of missing SNP funds. Now, about an hour and a half after that, we then found out that Peter Murrell had indeed been charged. The Police Scotland had put out a statement yesterday to say that the man who was arrested at 9:30 yesterday morning went on to be charged at 6:35 p.m. after further questioning by the Police Scotland detectives investigating funding and finances of the party. Now, he's been charged in connection with the investigation and in connection with the embezzlement of SNP funds. Now, of course, this is an active police investigation and the police have been erring on the side of caution to once again instruct people, of course, that this will be subject to contempt of court order. But if we take a step back and we actually look at what this week has been like for the SNP and for Humza Yousaf, we see that Hate Crime Act legislation debate rolling on again into a third week. We now see that the SNP yesterday have chosen to ditch one of their key climate targets, the 2030 target to cut down greenhouse gas emissions by 75%. And then, of course, that decision to pull new prescriptions of puberty blockers in the wake of the CAS report. All taken together, the Greens party, some of the councillors around Scotland, will they actually want their party, the Scottish Greens, to move away from the coalition deal and to leave the SNP for this recent spate of decisions. So all things considered, not a particularly great week for the SNP up here in Scotland.
OK, Tony, thanks very much for that. And yes, of course, the SNP as well, just to add to that, they are involved in a charity push to ask 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, primary school kids in Scotland, if they're gay, bi or trans. We covered it on Patrick's show last night. So, yeah, interesting. Up next, are those guilty of antisocial behaviour getting an easy ride? In some parts of England, it's taken police up to 17.5 hours. Actually, some of you aren't going to be surprised at that. To come and deal with calls for help. So we're going to get stuck into that just after this break. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben and Pip. Stay with us.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's going to turn brighter eventually today, but at first it's cloudy and breezy with showers for many of us. We've got a number of systems moving south across the UK, low pressure close to Denmark, but higher pressure is moving in time for the weekend. Before it gets here, a lot of cloud, a cool breeze coming from the north-northwest. That's particularly noticeable on the North Sea coast. And we've got this area of showery rain moving through central parts of England, into parts of Wales, followed by further showers for much of south-east Scotland, north-east England. Temperatures will be suppressed in that northerly breeze, 11 Celsius in the east, but potential for 16 further west as skies brighten increasingly by the end of the day. And then overnight the rain disappears and we've got lengthy clear spells up and down the country. With the wind easing as well, well, we're going to see temperatures fall away. Perhaps a few fog patches here and there, particularly for Northern Ireland. Add a touch of frost first thing. But for many, it is a bright start. Blue skies across much of the country. A couple of exceptions. Northern Scotland, the cloud will be thickening through the day with some outbreaks of light rain later. And that breeze down the North Sea will make it feel on the cool side. The cloud will fill in by the afternoon in many places, but it's going to stay largely dry and bright and feeling pleasant with lighter winds compared with recent days and highs of 13 Celsius.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, police, they are taking, we are told, up to 17.5 hours to respond to calls of antisocial behaviour. This is an increase of 37% since 2021, so just in, 3 years?
Yeah, really interesting. What's behind it? Well, joining us now is former Detective Chief Superintendent at the Met Police, Kevin Hurley. Kevin, we know that the Tory government in recent years has bolstered the number of police officers. We had the 20,000 plus, which I think Boris Johnson was pushing forward to replace the officers that were cut previously. That said, why are they now failing to respond to calls of antisocial behaviour? Surely that's just the basics.
Well, what we do know is that before they bolstered with 20,000 brand new people who've yet to learn their job properly, they cut by 22,000 officers and another 20,000 back office staff, and have cut 60% of the police stations in the country. So the present government's reputation on maintaining police numbers is far from good. But the thing that concerns me about this, and I come at it from a point of view of not only 30 years in policing, but 4 years as an elected police and crime commissioner, where I attended countless public meetings, listening to what concerns the main rump of the public. And it's antisocial behaviour, antisocial behaviour, antisocial behaviour. Assaults, robberies, rape, murder are right down the bottom of most people's agendas when it comes to how they live. And so I think the police service, politicians and local authorities are really missing a trick here in the way in which resources are configured in delivering personnel to deal with issues. So let me give you an example. As a result of the clamour from every single imaginable activist group, whether it's black community, Muslim community, LGBTQ community, police divert significant numbers of resources to engagement, whatever that means, in activity related to that. All of those people are taken off the street. Let me put that in perspective for you. Less than 1% of all the meetings between police and the public are stop and search. Of that,
probably less than 0.1% involve difficult searches with young black youths. Yet the police service turns itself inside out, trying to demonstrate how good it is dealing with the black community, in particular young people. This is a huge diversion of resources that should be used for dealing with nuisance neighbours, people throwing rubbish in the streets, smashing up phone boxes, damaging our buses, causing problems outside the kebab house, driving their scramble motorbikes in the allotments out the back of where people live, causing trouble in the phone lifts. Police and politicians have got this wrong about what's important for the public. Antisocial behaviour, and you said it earlier at the very start of that, trailing this programme, affects every single one of us every day. And the police response, for all sorts of reasons, not the least of which is the cuts they faced and the failure to increase resourcing for police and the criminal courts that support the police and prisons. They cannot attend in the numbers they want to.
Kevin?
But I'm afraid with the government being stuck for cash as we are, I don't really see any hope in the future, because it's not just the police.
Kevin?
Police can only deal with antisocial behaviour if there's a sanction, and if the courts are overwhelmed, prisons and probation are overwhelmed, it's a problem.
OK. Kevin, let me just put to you what the government says, which is that they've got an increased police presence in hotspots as part of a £160 million action plan. But what you hear repeatedly from victims is that police are playing down complaints of antisocial behaviour, and they are looking at it as neighbourly nuisance. They're just not taking it seriously enough until there is a very long run of incidents.
Yeah, well, I mean, 2 points. First off, 160 million is an absolute drop in the ocean. When I said what you need, if you want to deal with this, is court systems that can deal speedily with cases and appropriate sanctions, whatever they are, up to and including prisons. And we all know that's collapsing. But back to your other point, well, police would do that, wouldn't they? Because if they haven't got the resources to send people out because they're overwhelmed dealing with mentally disordered people in the street, because there are no secure mental facilities or inadequate numbers of mental health resources, this takes up huge numbers of police. And of course, all the other different pressure groups and interest groups distracting from time, they end up doing just like an A&E nurse does, which is triage every call that comes in and try and put some kind of palliative there answer, which of course is unsatisfactory. Because if you've got people continually causing trouble outside your house every night of the week, or causing you to feel intimidated when you're walking from the railway station, by the way, they catcall you if you're a woman or someone, you know, like that walking home of an evening. It's unsatisfactory, but they got no option because there's not adequate resources.
Kevin, do we need to adopt something akin to Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York, his broken window approach, whereby he transforms a crime-ridden city in a couple of years into a fairly decent, fairly safe place by having a zero-tolerance approach, whether it's a broken window, whether it's vandalism or, looting. The idea is that you stamp that kind of stuff out and it discourages any further serious crimes escalating.
Well, you are talking to a one-man political party who, when he won the police and crime post in Surrey, stood as the zero-tolerance policing ex-chief party. So, yes, I completely support that. When I ran West London, Hammersmith, Fulham and so on, we had a zero-tolerance approach, working with the local authority to all forms of crime, saying precisely what you do. If you make sure people pay their bus fares on the tube, they pay their fares on the subway, you respond to rowdy yobs and people see there is a sanction, that tends to drive other types of behaviours. So, yes, I do believe in an idea that if something is done wrong, there is some kind of sanction. I'm not saying hang, flog or put them in prison, but you don't ignore stuff. So a real example is you're walking down the high street as a cop and you see someone drop a kebab paper on the floor. You go up to them and say, pick that up, please, and put it in the bin. No, I won't. Give me your name, I'm giving you a summons. No, I won't. If you don't give me your name, you'll be arrested. I won't be arrested. If you don't want to be arrested, I'll use force on you, and if you resist, you'll be sprayed or you'll be tasered. So pick it up.
Got it.
That is zero tolerance policing.
OK, former top cop at the Met Police, Kevin Hurley, thanks very much for your time.
We are getting some reaction to our chat with Kevin, which is why I wasn't being rude. I was looking at what you're saying to us so I can air it. Eric says, problem with police is community officers, police that believe they are above the basics and have lost the ability to communicate with the public. Dickie, you say it took 4 days for police to knock on your door after it was reported that yobs were shooting at cars with air pistols.
Yeah, and just on the sick note Britain, Neil says they talk about over £61 billion in benefit costs at the same time as the sick and disabled because this blames all the costs on the sick. But those billions are including universal credit and housing costs. And Gemma says, I'm really looking forward to St George's Day. I display the flag and I feel like this year I do. Not sure why that one's in there, actually. We've not spoken about St George's Day, but yeah, I agree with you, Gemma.
Maybe Good Afternoon Britain will touch on St George's Day. They are talking about pets, pet theft. They're asking for your photos of your pets. That'll be a good one. You'll all be writing in with that. But thank you for your company this morning on Britain's Newsroom. A busy one, as always. Whatever you're doing, have a great weekend. You're back tonight.
Yes, Patrick shows tonight. This is Good Afternoon Britain. Enjoy.
Yes, we will be getting on to pets, pet theft and talking to the MP behind a new bill on cracking down on it. But also Iran and Israel's retaliation. Are we going to be sucked into a wider war? Big questions as Britain and the world stands on the brink.
And as the Prime Minister has said that we need to crack down on sick note Britain, we will be debating whether or not we are a lazy nation.
All that to come on the show. Do get involved, of course. We look forward to your views all after this weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's going to turn brighter eventually today, but at first it's cloudy and breezy with showers for many of us. We've got a number of systems moving south across the UK, low pressure close to Denmark, but higher